of supporting each other through the inevitably difficult times ahead. Just some housekeeping, that we're recording this session for those who can't make the call. And so we can use it as a training resource. If you don't want to be on camera, please switch your videos off. We have a lot to cover this evening, so we may run over. Please stay if you can for an extra 15 to 20 minutes, depending on questions arising. I'm going to pass over to Ben, but yeah, very warm welcome to everyone here. And we will have lots of breakout groups and things like that, so be ready to speak as well.
Lovely, thank you very much, Miranda. It's really nice to see all of you here. So we've got the 100 Days campaign, and the most important thing is mobilizing people to come to it. And XR can bring so many people, but I don't think to get 100,000 people on the streets, we can't do it alone. And so, as Miranda says, it's really important that we start to reach out to other community groups within our areas, and join with them, and see if they can join us for the 100 days. What I'd like to start off with a little exercise. We're going to go into breakout groups in a minute in pairs, and in making these relationships with other groups, it's really important that we think, that we spend a little time thinking about what motivates us. Why is it that we do what we do? What is our motivations? And what is our social place within society? And we have an idea of why we do what we do, and know our place within society. And then that gives us a better idea of when we're reaching out to other groups, and we acknowledge the different places that other people hold in society and what might motivate them. So we're looking a little bit for what the shared values there might be between us and other groups. But just as we look at the shared values, we're also looking at those things that we might not be comfortable with in reaching out to other groups, those things that we might find challenging, those things when we talk to other people that they have a different viewpoint from us, they come from a different background from us, and what are those things that we find uncomfortable. So I'm going to ask if you consider 2 questions. So in a minute, we're going to go out into breakout rooms, and you're going to go for about 12 minutes, and we're going to have in pairs, and you're going to have 6 minutes each per person, and then you're going to swap over. And so the 2 questions I want you to consider when going into the breakout rooms is, first of all, if you can say a little bit about what it is that motivates you. What is it that motivates you to do what you do? Yeah, so what are your core values and beliefs? So spend half your time on that. And the second question is, what groups or individuals might you find challenging to communicate with? So it might be outside of your comfort zone, might have alternative views, might come from a different background. So those 2 things. So you have 6 minutes each in your breakout groups. What are your core values, and what motivates you, and what groups or individuals might you find challenging to work with? Lovely, thank you. Okay, so April, what we were thinking, people have just gone into breakout groups. And we're going to have slightly less time now. We're going to have about 5 minutes each. And what we're saying is 2 questions. What is it that motivates you to do what you do within XR? And the other question is, as this workshop is about reaching out to other groups, what might you find challenging in reaching out to those groups, or thinking about people's different perspectives and people's different backgrounds? So are you okay to go first, April? Sorry, I haven't given you much time.
No, that's fine. And you've probably done this before. Yeah. So the first one is, what motivates me to do it?
Yeah, what motivates you?
I think it's because it just feels like the right thing to do. Quite aside of whether or not it's going to be effective, I wouldn't feel right if I wasn't trying to do my best about what seems like the most important thing facing humanity at the moment. Okay, so the thing about motivation was just saying I just want to be part of something this important. Then challenges. I do think I'll find this challenging. I'm not quite sure how to put my finger on why. It is partly just to do with lack of self-confidence, I guess, of feeling okay to represent the organisation to other organisations. And also that feeling of a lot of them are quite unknown. I guess I'd feel fairly comfortable in the environmental movement because I feel I understand what's going on for them. Going further afield does feel a bit more like I could put a foot wrong, I guess.
So they might not have the same kind of like you know, values, or you know, they might not share the same values that we have, that kind of thing.
Yeah, and I don't understand their experience so well, I guess.
Yeah. Do you think there might be some mutual ground?
I'd hope so. I mean, we're not targeting organisations that are diametrically opposed to us.
Yeah.
And yes, it would be different for each group, I guess. But I guess identifying that is the place to start, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, brilliant. Steph, do you want to have some time then? Thank you, April. Sorry. Steph, would you like to have like, I think we haven't got a huge amount of time left, but would you like to take 4 minutes?
Yeah, sure. Yes.
Yeah. So can you remember the 2 questions?
Yeah, I've written them down.
Okay, fantastic. All right, go for it.
So, why do I do what I do? What's my motivation? I want to make a difference. I suppose I want to feel I play a little part in change. And feel that that my presence somewhere and the things I do actually do make a difference. That I leave a space. Every time I go into a space, I bring something into it and leave something behind that's good. That's what I'd like to think that I do. What I find challenging, I can talk more about that. That's easier to talk about. I think politicos and people who are very certain and have no doubts, feel that they're right and other people are wrong. I find them very, very hard to talk to. There's a lot around.
Okay, yeah. So people who kind of have fixed ideas, yeah.
And a lot of their ideas I would share, but I don't share their certainty and their convictions in the same way. I'm always full of doubt, but I don't see that as a bad thing. I think being doubtful is healthy.
Absolutely. Do you think that would prevent you from being able to speak to people like that, possibly, Steph?
It makes me reluctant to talk to them, unless I know them really well. I mean, I know a lot of people in SWP, for instance, and on one level I talk to them friendly, talk about, share a lot, and I know when I'm on safe ground, but as a sort of boundary beyond which I wouldn't go.
Right. Okay. Well, maybe, it sounds like maybe, the groups that we're going to reach out to, obviously, if there are going to be some who are going to want to join and some who aren't going to want to join. So maybe that kind of makes it a bit easier in a way. because you know, the people who really aren't interested in talking to us, maybe there's not that much we can do about it, you know, or maybe it takes a long time. So maybe
that's not the problem. Not with the sort of politicos I'm thinking of. The problem is that they think they know better, and they will join us, but they'll join us with a view to pushing us in a certain direction, rather than going with the flow, because they think they know best.
yes. Okay, brilliant.
That I find very hard.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, thank you, Steph. Ned?
Would it help to know that, as far as I'm aware, we're going to be asking these other groups to abide by our principles and values, so that they're also non-violent? Obviously, they may not abide by every single one, but that's the sort of request, I think, is that certainly they abide by non-violent direct action, and that they could be guided by our other principles and values. What do you think, Ben?
Yeah, I think absolutely that's going to help. I mean, I think we're certainly asking people to abide by the non-violence direct action, and hopefully, yes, I think you're absolutely right, Ned, and hopefully we'll have an opportunity to when we form these relationships with other groups, to talk about our own principles and values, and I think that would be quite important. So maybe, you know, we can come to an understanding over those. But Steph, I absolutely agree. Some people is very difficult to talk to because they think they're right, and you know, and it is difficult. How much longer have we got, Ned, before the breakout rooms close?
They have 1 minute 23 seconds left of the breakout room with I think I set a 30-second countdown.
Okay. Rosalind?
Hi. Yeah. What was my concern? Yes. Are we necessarily asking these other groups to join us as Extinction Rebellion or as Festival of Resistance? So are we dropping our spiciness levels, you know, or not?
Thank you, Rosalind. That's a really good question. I wonder whether I might answer that in the full group, just so everyone gets to hear what the answer is. Do you mind to ask it again when everybody rejoins? Would that be all right? Lovely, fantastic.
Sorry, I'm late.
No.
Just been to a grandson's birthday party.
Oh, lucky you. Suddenly it's getting cold in here. Ned, if people are asking questions when they rejoin or want to ask a question, I can't see anyone if they put their hands up. So if someone wants to speak, how do we manage that?
If people can use the electronic hand signal, so the reactions button,
yeah,
and they can do that on a phone as well by tapping the screen and then more. That's the easiest way, and then they pop to the top left of the window of the Zoom.
Fabulous. Okay, so I think people are just rejoining us now from the breakout groups. Just bear with me 1 minute. Okay, looks like everybody's back with us. Wonderful. I'm going to ask for some feedback in a second, just for a few minutes, to be nice to hear if anyone has anything to say from, you know, what they were talking about. But before we do that, one of the participants, Rosalind, had a question which I thought was helpful for other people to hear. So Rosalind, do you want to go ahead and ask your question again?
Certainly. Are you or we asking people from other groups to join us as Extinction Rebellion with all our reputation and baggage, or as Festival of Resistance?
Okay, so what we're asking groups to do, I think for the alliance building with other community groups, we're not asking them to join Extinction Rebellion. What we're asking them to do is to come as themselves on 100 days. But we are asking them to abide by our non-violence, the non-violence principle that we all abide by. And we will want to have a communication with them as we grow the relationship with them about our principles and values. But we are basically asking them to come as themselves. I mean, I think I have a wonderful picture in my mind of different organizations coming with their own identities, but we're all coming together. And I think that's one of the main purposes of this particular strategy. Miranda, did you want to input anything on that? No. Okay. So I'm just wondering, does anyone want to give any little bit of feedback from their breakout groups? Anything that was significant or interesting that they want to share with all of us? Just if you can put your electronic hand up, that would be the easiest, because I can't see everyone on my screen. Yes, Davina.
We discuss citizens' assemblies because I find it hard relating to my kids and my neighbours about climate change. Oh, it's that again, go away. Whereas citizens' assemblies, that everyone should have a voice, may be a different way in to the same problem. And I like that idea.
Okay. Lovely, thank you, Davina. Anyone else have any comments, anything that came up? Emma.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about the fact that for me, the hardest people, and I think for some of the other people, I was in a breakout room of 3 for some reason, somebody else in the breakout room, was people that are behind the message of XR, but so against our methods that they kind of, in my feeling, put themselves in a silo and refuse to work outside of that silo. And my feeling is every successful movement has had a range of levels of radicalness, a range of levels of, people have done different things. And so I don't have I find it relatively easy to connect to the people who say, I respect what you do, but that's not for me. But I find it very difficult to connect to the people who say, I believe in your messaging, but I believe that everything you're doing is the wrong method. And I think there are quite a lot of people like that who sit within different groups and areas within the broader movement.
Yeah, I think, Emma, thank you so much for your comment. I think that raises a really interesting point. I don't think, personally, I don't think there's an easy answer. I think it possibly needs to be managed on a case-by-case basis, but I think it certainly in our relationships with other groups and other individuals, there's always going to be difficulties, and these things take time, to resolve. But I don't have an easy answer to that. Okay, we don't have much time. So I'm just going to take one more question before we move on to the next section. So Lisa, do you want to?
Yeah, I just mentioned that the people I find it hardest to, I find most challenging to deal with the people who have given up, actually, who say it's too late and you know, we just need to live our lives and leave it because it's all too late. They're the ones I find most difficult to convince.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Lisa. It's very difficult trying to encourage those kind of people. Ned?
Jacques has got a technical question.
Okay, go ahead, Jack.
Can I ask Lisa Hill, what does that mean, that where she is in the located, is that for your local group that you're saying it's to people that or you counter in your community online when you use the online space, that you find that people say it's too late?
No, I was actually just had lots of sort of pre-Christmas gatherings with old friends, you know, old groups, old university friends over the past month or so. So, you know, people who in the past I've known very well, and you know, but maybe haven't seen for a while. You know, I talk about what I do, and that's their response. So
I just had to clarify about like how close you were to the actual news in for real, instead of some kind of obscure media viewpoint. If it wasn't online, but it was actually in person.
No, normal people that I know. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, I think what we're going to do is we're going to move on to the next part, which is over to Miranda. And thank you very much for all the points you brought up. They were really important and valid. I'm sorry we don't have time to go through all of them just now.
Hi, thanks, Ben. And yeah, I think it would be really useful as well if we did a follow-up session where we covered specifically sort of sticky questions and difficult answers. And actually, like, I've sort of personally gained quite a lot of experience in talking about this now, because I'm reaching out sort of centrally to larger sort of NGOs and organizations and movements. So have some experience on how to deal with some of these questions now, which I would love to share with you all in a separate session. You know, the reason we haven't focused on that so much this time is we're starting from a starting point of not assuming anyone started to have these conversations yet. So this is kind of getting people started to have the conversations and then reconvene to kind of discuss some of the difficult things that have come up. But just on that question of like people who, you know, organizations, groups, people who say they can't sort of align with XR, something that is really important to highlight and acknowledge is that actually, you know, as a movement, we are like pivoting our strategy away from being so much the like pointy sort of sticky end of the climate movement, you know, the spicy kind of really radical action end. You know, like JSO has kind of taken that mantle and like run with it and taken it to whole new places that we have or will. So, you know, that leaves space for us to be the mass movement. Or to be a mass movement anyway, because we know we're not the movement. That's why we're reaching out across divides into other organizations. And we will be like moving away from targeting, you know, from public disruption, like intentional public disruption in our like XR UK action strategy and things like that, really focusing on actions that target like power and corporations, government, things like that. So that's like, this is an opportunity for us to tell a new story about. So I think something, you know, I was actually surprised that sort of quite sort of small c conservative organizations that I've spoken to that I thought would say there's no way we could ever, you know, be seen with you. You know, none of them actually said that. So I think, you know, there's conversations to be had there about how, you know, we've evolved, the movement's grown up, and perhaps like our reputation isn't quite so sort of divisive, and that perhaps there is more room for people, individuals, groups who thought they couldn't stand with us before to stand with us. But yeah, that's just a bit of a diversion. What I was going to talk about was about relationship mapping. So the idea of relationship mapping is it comes from power mapping, which is something slightly different. Power mapping is more when you have a really specific campaign in a local area with a specific outcome you want to achieve. But I will talk about power as I talk about this this activity. So like power, I'm defining power, and this comes from this kind of community organizing model, power is defined as the ability to get things done. So when I'm talking about power, I'm not like trying to be kind of, you know, power hungry and aggressive and that sort of thing. It's just power just equates to the ability to get something done, to achieve something. And what we're encouraging groups to do, and what we want to do when we do our local group alliance building, is tap into a web of relationships, because by growing our relationships and our alliances, we can grow our power, our ability to get things done. So why do we want to do this? Like, we want to reach out deeply into our communities. We want to unite in order to support each other and find a common interest. And we want to bring others on board with our own agenda. In this case, it's the climate and ecological emergency, as well as the 100 Days project. And we also want to reach demographics and people and parts of our community we have not yet managed to. So the strategy that we're promoting in this instance, in order to do that, is this mapping strategy. So in order to build this strategic web of relationships and get this reach into parts of our communities, we need to identify individuals who are trusted by the rest of the community. So we all have limited resources in terms of time and energy. So we need to be strategic about who we target. You know, climate actually, an ecological emergency actually affects everyone on this earth. So potentially we could reach out to everyone. That's a really big pool to draw upon. So we need to be thinking a bit, we need to narrow this down and be a bit more targeted and strategic about it. So I think Ned has the grid that we are recommending people use. So the next step with this is to make a list of groups, organizations, parts of the community that you would like to reach, and plot them on this grid. And it might, and what's often a very good idea is to start with an initial map of where you have warm contacts. So with your local group, with your group of people you want to do this work with, just, you know, throw out there, who do you each hold contacts with? And you might be surprised at how many contacts you collectively hold in your within your group already, and how much reach you already have into your community. So when you've done that, think who's missing. Like, who else is in your community that you have not managed to build relationships with that you'd like to? So that might be, for example, people most affected by climate or social justice issues. It might be like poorer parts of your communities of colour locally to you. It might be faith communities. It might be particular age demographics. It's really important to think, who are we missing? Who are we not speaking to? Who's not here that should be here? It's a really important question. Because quite often it's easy to reach out to the same old people, and it's actually, you know, and thinking like, what are the barriers and why are these other people not joining us, that you really kind of do something incredibly powerful. So if you make the initial list and then plot them on the grid that you can see on the screen, and you might want to consider color coding that. So you might have categories of groups that have a particular color. So faith groups might be purple, local businesses might be orange, local politicians might be blue, like parents and families groups might be green, and there are all sorts of other, you know, trade unions might be another color. You might be thinking about you know, local branches of NGOs. You might be thinking about food banks. There's all sorts of categories of group that you might like want to color code and think, right, who have we actually got here? So when you've done that map and you've plotted that all out, you might want to consider the following questions. So think about, how powerful are you already? Like, how much reach have you already got? And which of these relationships will make you more powerful? So when you're considering how powerful are we already, you may sort of come to the conclusion that actually in your community you're not that powerful. But the important thing to remember is that can change and shift and move, and actually it's through growing these relationships that you can become more powerful and grow your collective power, and actually strengthen each other's power as well. And the process allows you to be really strategic and intentional, like focusing on an activity that actively builds power, rather than like a scattergun approach where you just reach out to anyone and everyone, drain resources, Yeah. So so after you've done that, if you keep the relationships map, use it to set targets. And then once you've done some reaching out and you've had a period of time of doing this work, come back to it and assess how your relationships have changed and look at it again. And yeah, like I said, you know, it's really important to consider individuals in these particular groups, communities, movements that are like going to get you into that community. So you think, right, who is really important in that community? Like who speaks that, you know, say it's a church community, who do I need to speak to in that church who will give me access to the rest of that church community? Who I need to speak to? Say, you know, we haven't, like, imagine, you know, I live here in Islington, if we're thinking there's a really big Turkish community that we haven't reached out to, we haven't spoken to, and we're not getting to come to our meetings, like who do we know that can speak to that community, that we can use, you know, that we can meet with and talk to, who will build a bridge for us into that community. So you know, that's a lot of information to take in. I can share, you know, in our local group alliance building pack, there is more information and more documents. We can share that in the chat. But in your breakout groups, you won't be most likely with people in the same area as you, but maybe if you just start to have a think and discuss together, like what.
Frozen.
Yeah, frozen.
Might be a starting place when you take this back to your local group. What do you already have any that you'd like to build on, and like, you know, where might they go on this axis, the contacts that you already have? So I'll let Ned break out what you'll discuss in about. So you've got about I can't.
There'll be 5 or 6 people in each breakout room.
Sorry, just checking the time that we set in the groups.
For
15 minutes. You've got 15 minutes per group. We might want to cut that down to 10 actually, because so 10 minutes to discuss that in your breakout groups, please. If anyone wants to feed back, I feel like it's going to be a bit difficult for me to see who's got their hand up with so many people. Maybe raise an electronic. Got anything you'd like to feed back, if you can, from your breakout groups? Okay, no. Oh yeah, Richard and then Nigel. So Richard first.
Yeah, we found it a very helpful exercise actually, because it helped us to think about you know, where different groups of people or whatever would fit on that spectrum. So actually just, you know, and deciding how, you know, one of the things we thought about was that, you know, groups that sat in the top left, i.e., you know, powerful and aligned, are probably going to have their own kind of organization already, probably have a membership and a means of communicating with them. So these would be very useful to us, but then also thinking, you know, a lot of the people who we would want, you know, people who are, shall we say, aligned, but less powerful. And I think you were alluding to it, Miranda. We were struggling to work out how we might connect with those people to enable them, if you like, to join us. So we found it a very, very useful exercise. So thank you.
Thanks, Richard. That's excellent. That's really great feedback. And yeah, I think, like, you know, those people that you're not currently in touch with, you know, it's about trying to figure out, right, who can I speak to that might be able to speak to someone who can, you know, speak to someone who can get me to them, and like using our network, our existing networks and webs to like reach further and build bigger, more far-reaching webs. Yeah, thank you for that feedback. And Nigel?
Yeah, one of the things that I've started doing is going to the actions of other groups, going to their events. And there you're likely to meet the coordinator of that event. You might even meet some people from other groups, and you might hear about groups you don't know about, but you can make contact and give our message an invitation to the coordinators. And so, for example, tomorrow I'm going to be out on the street with the nurses' pickets, making contacts with them anywhere you can think of. I think that's a helpful thing to do, to make contact.
Thanks, Nigel. Yeah, that's great. And actually, these strikes and picket line support is really important, and it's something that XR trade unionists have done a lot of work around, and that we would we're going to do follow-up sessions from this, and one of them will be around like reaching out to trade unions and trade union branches and trade union going to picket lines and things like that. I think I saw one more hand up, and then I'll close it. Was it?
I had my hand up about the group efforts. We talked about the alignment between those who are powerful. Maurice was in our group, and he put in the chat the link to explain about power mapping. I found that really useful. There are others in our group who were able to go into the choice of whether it was an involvement of bringing people to London, as I believe for Brexit there were 1 million individuals in London, but for 100,000 for XR, I'm hearing from the other who spoke, thank you for your comment, how it would be a different type of placement for an individual involvement with XR, and what that would mean to a green political party. I'm having to interpret, and I'm just ending on the fact that I'm sitting back at my house and reinterpreting the information and allowing that to circulate as I take action to be on the streets. Like we say in our local meeting, not bums on chairs, but feet on the road.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, thanks very much. I'm afraid I'm going to have to close.
Can I just say, I've put a lot of information into the chat about what we've been doing in Oxfordshire. There's Facebook page, and Jeannie's waving at me. Look at the Twitter account especially, because that's really taken off and is connecting loads of local groups.
Yeah, I wanted to really support that, because what Tina's done is formed a group with a fabulous name that you thought about loads, didn't you, Tina? Oxford Together for Climate. And I just think that's a really good idea. It's a kind of umbrella, and I'm speaking for you, Tina. I hope that's okay, because I was really taken with the idea that other groups advertise, all the groups advertise the events on this platform, and therefore everybody's doing everybody else's service. Therefore, it's kind of mutually beneficial, and it's not just us trying to recruit or advertise our things. And I just, if you can speak more about it at some other time, Tina, I'd be really interested. And on the trade union thing, we need to get a trade union motion quite soon. It's not long till April. If you have to get it through your branch, meets once a month, then it got to go up to the Midlands, and then it's got to go up to national. And I would like to put a link, someone to put a link in the chat for trade union contacts, because I want to get together a model motion, because we will miss the boat. We want trade unions to sponsor the coaches and hostels and all that kind of stuff. So we need to do that in January, because trade unions meet once a month very often, and that's not giving us much time. So will someone please put that contact, if there is one, in the chat?
Okay, yeah. Thanks, Jen. I'm going to ask people to wait until they're called upon to speak, if that's okay, just because there's a lot of people on this call and need to make sure that we cover everything. But yeah, thanks for all that feedback, everyone. I'll pass to Ben, who actually has some really interesting feedback on some work that you've been doing, Ben.
Thanks, Miranda. Just before we move on to the next section, I'd just like to bring in Rob Callender for a second, just to clarify on what spicy actions or not are going to happen on the 21st. So Rob, please go ahead.
Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm here from one of the action teams in XR, and it's come up in the chat. I came a bit late, so I might have missed other things, but there's been a kind of the rumor mill about what's going to be spicy in the new XR, and things have changed and all that kind of stuff. And I think it can be sort of quite easily set out, which is that on one level, there's quite a conscious decision at this moment for XR on purpose to build these relationships, to move away from making disruption of the public as a primary target, which doesn't mean that the public won't end up being disrupted, because the plan for 100 days is to bring 100,000 people to Parliament Square. That will cause, if we achieve it, a significant amount of disruption. But our primary aim, the primary aim of our actions for the next 100 days at least, is not disrupting the quote unquote sort of Johnny down at the pub. That's how it's been described in a sort of colloquial sense. The idea is the actions will target other things, and obviously also there's local group autonomy involved in that. But the reason for that is so that we can make relationships with lots of different groups that have lots of different theories of change. And we've decided that actually choosing this, 100 days, choosing this, decide to move away from quote unquote, targeting common people, as it were, moving away from that is a good idea to get more and more people excited about getting on board and working together for common aims at this moment. So that's a clarification around our action strategy at the moment for this period.
Lovely. Thanks ever so much, Rob. Okay, all right, we're going to move on to the next section, which is a bit more practical about what the processes are to kind of like make sure we register who we're working with and how you can go about doing this and what the kind of structures are. I wanted to start by saying, so I'm going to talk about a series of documents and different resources. All these resources, we will send the links out to you after this chat and probably tomorrow. So don't worry if you can't, if you can't find them now, all the links will be sent to you. So what are the resources? So one of the key resources is there's a Telegram group exactly for alliance building, and we're hoping that the people who are doing the alliance building will join this and talk about the work that you're doing and share ideas and share what you're doing, and that would be really helpful. And particularly for those people who probably know quite a lot already. I know Tina was talking about quite a lot of resources that she had. It'd be lovely, Tina, if you could join that Telegram group and maybe share them on there. We have 2 forms which we'd like you to fill in. There's a form for potential groups, so groups who you've contacted, who maybe you haven't had a response back from yet, or it's still at early stages, so they're a kind of potential group and they haven't confirmed yet whether they're coming. And then there's a second form for groups who have confirmed that they'll be coming on the 21st or the period after the 21st. The potential groups form is not as important. It's just really for us to try and stop people from contacting the same group from different areas. So, it's not critical, but it's just helpful if someone knows that you've already contacted them and they don't need to contact them. The confirmed groups form is much more important, because that's then going to let us know what groups you're working with who have said that they're coming on the 21st. So that's really important. And I think one of the fields we haven't got on there yet is probably an approximation of how many numbers that independent group might bring with them. But then that's going to start to give us an idea through the alliance building of how many numbers we're going to get coming. There's also going to be a spreadsheet of the groups already contacted, so you can you'll get a link to that spreadsheet, so you'll be able to see if anyone has put groups who they've contacted. You'll be able to see those. You can check there to see if they've already been contacted by someone else and you don't need to contact them. And there's also the local relationship planning guidelines. which probably some of you have seen already, but that just goes through these steps of how to contact all these people and what the structures are. And we'll also have links to other resources in that document. Okay, so what we're suggesting is that there are possibly two different methods of contacting local groups. The first method is probably what we've been doing already is you create a list of groups, you get all their contact details, and then you could target them as a group. So you could send out a group email. So what I think probably easier if I just talk through what Bristol did. So Bristol have already done this. And if I just talk through what they did, then it will give you a better idea of how they worked. And this is one model that you could follow. So Bristol, I think, listed about 130 groups on the spreadsheet, and then they sent out an invitation email to all of those groups, inviting them to an event to talk about how they could join together. Now, when they invited them to the event, it wasn't specifically for 100 days. The kind of position that Bristol took was that they didn't really want to lead on saying, we want you to come and join us, because they felt really that they needed to start from a position which was a bit more humble. And so what they started from a position of saying, we would like to work together with you because together we are stronger, and we'd like to find out what ways we can work together to make us stronger and to amplify all of our voices. So it's not just about amplifying XR's voice, but it's also, when we're joining with other groups, it's about how their voices are going to be amplified. When we're working with other groups, it's got to be a mutual relationship. So they have to gain something as well as us. And I think this is really important to bear in mind when you're working with other groups. It's like, you know, there has to be, it has to be reciprocal, you know, so you're each getting something out of it. And so what Bristol did was they invited them to an event, and they asked an independent facilitator to come to facilitate, so that it wasn't even going to be facilitated by XR. I'm not saying that everyone should follow this model, but I'm just giving it as an example. And of course, they're going to talk about 100 days during that event, and that's obviously going to be important. But you know, perhaps in creating these relationships, we're not creating these relationships just so that people can come on 100 days. These relationships will continue to exist after the 100 days. And so it's really about XR reaching out to other people, reaching out to other groups and working with other groups, you know, for a continued period of time, because together we are stronger. So that's the first method I wanted to mention. So a kind of a group email out. The second method is where people in your local groups will have their own contacts in other groups. And so it's you kind of leveraging those contacts that you already have in those other groups to say, you know, we're doing this thing in 100 days. We'd really like to work together with you. You know, there are other ways that we would like to support you. As we've already talked about in the nursing strikes, how we can go and support them. So it's leveraging those individual contacts you have with them already, and then making contact with these local groups using those contacts. So those are the two kinds of methods. So kind of like, you know, obviously you're going to strategically want to make a list of groups that you want to contact, but you can contact them individually, or you can contact them as a group and set up an event to invite them all to it. So those are the two methods I wanted to talk about. Sorry, my throat is getting dry with all that talking. Okay, are there any quick questions on that section? I think I've covered most of what I wanted to cover. Does anyone have any quick questions about that? Do you want to just, I can't see the chat at the moment, so if you want to raise your hand. Yeah, Denise.
Yeah, can I come back to the spreadsheet? Is that okay? I just want to ask a question about how that operates. Because I had a look at those forms in terms of filling in for each individual group that you're working with. I just think that is admin overload, especially for some groups that haven't got the capacity. But I mean, I've already started an Excel spreadsheet, and having done a lot of telephone work in the past, I'm quite particular about how that is kept up to date in terms of ongoing communications and as a tool for sharing. Now, I live in a semi-rural area, and some of the local groups are going to have crossover in terms of their contacts with other groups. And so I'm wondering if there is a way, should local groups or regional groups set up their own Excel spreadsheets where different groups within that region can share those? I mean, you talked about a central spreadsheet, and I'm just wondering how accessible that is for regions, or I don't know, a particular delegated person from a local group or whatever.
Thanks, Denise. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I think what you're suggesting, actually, to have regional shared spreadsheets actually sounds like a really good idea. And in fact, one of the kind of ways we were looking at this is to set up regional hubs. So that's something that could evolve. It's just we haven't got there yet. But I think certainly, I think it sounds like a good idea to share regional spreadsheets. Yeah, and in terms of the potential, yeah, I think you're right. It is quite a lot of admin to load everything upstairs, and it kind of makes it sense to break down into regions. So we can, yeah, definitely good idea. Lovely, thank you. Emma and then Annika.
I've just put a suggestion about region tabs in the chat. So my question is about messaging and what we're talking to other local groups about messaging. Is that relevant for now, or is that going to get covered in a bit?
I think, can you leave that question for a bit, because it might get covered in a later section. Thanks, Emma. Annika?
Yeah, it's just about what kind of our role is after we've made these contacts and we communicated with all these people. Are we then the person that coordinates everyone from our area right up until the actual event, and getting them all there and all the rest of it, or do we hand people on for communication with other people in XR? Or that's what I'm not quite sure about.
Lovely, thank you, Annika. Basically, once you've built a relationship or link with these other local groups, it really will be down, I think, you will be getting information about how the 100 Days campaign is going to work, but I think it will be up to you to coordinate with the local groups to disseminate that information. I mean, maybe this is something that we need to think about a little bit more. I don't know, Miranda, do you have any input on this?
Yeah, so I wouldn't recommend doing this sort of on your own if you can. Like, that's the first thing to say. So, like, if you have others in your local group, in your community, that you can do it as a team, I think that's important. It's quite a big thing for one person to do on their own. In terms of, like support, there's the gardeners who are there to help support with things like this, and we're talking to the gardeners and working with them on this as well from that, like, kind of gardener point, that jump off point. There's a team being established to work on things like accommodation and transport and things like that, so there'll be some very clear communications that should be quite easy to pass on to other local groups. But the hope of this really is that this work goes beyond the 100 days into sort of something like some people have described in the meeting having already, which is like a really strong network within your community, which you can draw upon, not just for this but for other things in the future. So for us to kind of swoop in and like take over holding those relationships isn't really what we're aiming for. We're aiming for like these relationships to be sort of mutually nourishing and grow and sort of self-sustaining, ideally. And in terms of like, there was a question around messaging as well to the other groups. In the local group alliance building pack, there is some like guidance on messaging, but actually, you know, like, as we've said, we do follow-up trainings, and at this point I think doing this research piece and doing the mapping and getting the, you know, the plan for who you want to reach out for is quite a lot of work in the meantime as well. So we can do a focus session on sort of messaging and what to say. I think that would be a really, like, that's kind of, yeah, like I'm sort of hearing from this session that would be a really useful next session. But maybe until that, you know, we'll do that as early as we can in January, maybe focus between then and now on actually just doing the planning that we've been talking about in this session.
Lovely, thanks, Miranda. Okay, so Claire, we just take your question before moving on to the next bit.
Hi, thanks. I was just wondering about GDPR, and not just the legal compliance, but just the respectfulness of sharing information about groups and people's contact details and stuff. Is there some guidance on that? Or can we get some guidance?
There is a GDPR working group, I think, in XR. So I don't know if I'm qualified to answer that. So probably best to get some input from them. I mean,
should we do that ourselves, or could there be some central guidance to all of us? I guess what concerns me is that, you know, I might say, oh yeah, I know someone who's a member of this group, here's their phone number. And that phone number and name ends up on a spreadsheet somewhere. You know, just that kind of thing. Like, do we need to guard against that?
I can come in here as well, if that's all right. So, I mean, in terms of the spreadsheets and the forms that have been shared today, there's conversations with the XR's GDPR circle on those and the spreadsheets that will be compiled as a result.
Right.
I think, like, you know, with some of the stuff we're talking about in terms of, you know, asking people to put you in touch with someone, you don't need to put people's phone numbers and things like that on spreadsheets or even their names. You know, like if I want to speak to, you know, a particular group or organization, I might ask, you know, a friend who knows someone who works for that organization. That's not a breach of GDPR, it's just networking.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, like, you know, as you reach out, you don't need to be inputting all of everyone's details on spreadsheets. What's important is the conversations and the connection, not like, you know, this kind of detailed recording.
Yeah. Thank you.
Lovely. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Claire. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next section. I think I don't want to take too long on this bit, so I was just going to give a little bit of an overview of an organisation that I contacted recently, and hopefully just give a little bit of a flavour of working with external organisations. So, so I'm based in Wandsworth, in XR Wandsworth, and I had a particular reason for reaching out. In fact, this was before the 100 days got announced, but the rebels in XR Wandsworth are mainly white and middle-aged and older, and Wandsworth is actually a very diverse area. So initially I wanted to reach out to try and get a more diverse, make XR Wandsworth more diverse and inclusive. And I was thinking about churches and approaching them through churches. And I was very lucky. We had a pastor in our XR group who had a contact with a local Caribbean and African church, and gave me the contact details for the pastor there. And so basically what happened was I just thought one day I would just go around. I'm quite happy just to go and visit people instead of phoning or emailing. So I just went round to go and visit them to have a chat. And I took something with me. So I took a gift with me, just so I wasn't coming empty-handed, because I didn't know them at all. And it was lucky, and he was in. He was very happy to get the gift. Was very surprised, and he was already quite. You know, he was very much aware of protest and civil disobedience, and he actually came from a tradition. He was actually American, from South Carolina, and he actually came from a tradition of kind of protest. So he was already quite open about that already. And basically, it took several meetings to kind of establish a kind of an understanding and a kind of a sharing and a trust, basically. That trust took time to develop. So it didn't come in the first meeting, it didn't come in the second meeting, but it did come in the third meeting. And once that trust was established, then from there, we could book a date when I said, you know, we'd like to come and talk to your congregation. And so obviously they're taking a risk in inviting us in. They don't really know us. So it was really, you know, quite a big step for them. But, you know, based on the conversations we'd had, they were happy to do that. And I couldn't have done that alone, actually. So, you know, if it had just been me by myself talking to him, I wouldn't have been able to do it. I actually had help from other people in talking to him. And when we went in, so they invited us into their congregation, and we stayed for the service. And then we talked after the service, and it wasn't just me who came. It was, I also brought someone else from one of the main XR groups who's also of Caribbean heritage. And I also brought someone from Asian heritage as well, who's from Christian Climate Action. And we all spoke at the event, and having those people there was really key to getting our message across and building up a bond with the people in the congregation. And then the other thing we did is we organized food for all of them. So after we'd spoken, they were all invited, and we went and shared food afterwards. So I think the main points I'm trying to say there is, you know, it takes time to establish trust, you know, depending on the organization you're working with, particularly if they're not, you know, if they're not specifically environmentally focused. In this case, they were a church. It takes time to establish trust, and it takes work. And also, is, you know, you can, it's much better if you can get help, support from other people. It works much better. And then the other thing I realized after our meeting was that this wasn't something that I could just now go and leave. I needed, if I wanted that relationship to continue, I needed to continue to work at it and support it. So I think it's good to be aware that when you're developing these relationships with other organizations, that they are going to take work, they're going to take effort, not bad work or bad effort. You know, it's not like hard work, but, you know, you do need to put the energy in, because relationships are not a thing, they are a process. You know, relationships that we have with anyone, you know, with our partners or with our family, you know, they're ongoing and they change all the time. And it's just, and it's going to be exactly the same with these other groups. It's finding the common ground. And for us, the common ground is, you know, we're all facing extinction, you know, and you know, it's just so important. Yeah, so I just thought I'd share that with you. I don't think I've got anything else particular to say about that, but, you know, it just kind of like, you know, we get something out of it and they get something out of it, and we're stronger together. And they, you know, and they've said they're going to come on the 21st as long as we put in the support work for them. So that's fantastic. Okay, I think I'm going to pass over to Rob now.
Oh my goodness. If you suddenly can't hear me because my internet's not so good here, let me know. Just raise a paw. I can normally see that, and then I'll turn my camera off. Yeah, I guess I'm gonna introduce the last little breakout room exercise, and I know we've been here for ages, so thanks for being here. I'll just say like a really little bit about myself. I'm now doing XR stuff again full time. I've been around for a long time, I guess, doing actions in different places, but also a lot of like local relationship building and building in different ways. And I actually left XR because what we're doing here in this room wasn't happening last year in the way that this is happening. I just want to say, like, sometimes it can feel strange, like lots has changed, but the fact that there's a room full of 60, 70 people at one point who are all thinking about trying to make relationships with their local groups in such an open-hearted way. Yes, we're here because we face extinction and the climate crisis, unlike so many other crises, is getting so much closer to us every single day, but also, but communities are the front line of it, and they always have been. The way in which people experience the margins that they've been pushed to by capitalism are different, and people experience that and are in resistance to that right now. And what we're doing is we're offering an opportunity by saying we've chosen a date, or we've chosen something, and their groups are doing that all the time, but they might feel very focused on their thing, and they have different strategies. All groups have different strategies and different ideas, and actually, it's not the realm of ideas that we always win on, because it's not about winning. If someone thinks they're right, you don't, get a nice relationship by being righter. You get a nice relationship by building something together. My background is before I got sort of clued up about the climate crisis, I used to prance around in tights and other things as an actor. And I did a lot of street theatre. I did a lot of political forum theatre. I also did a lot of prancing around in tights and doing silly things, which then was quite hard to do because when you see the climate crisis coming along, it's really hard to justify prancing around in tights. But the lessons I learned there, I have found incredibly important in the work I've done. So I left XR last year to start a movement called Jubilee for Climate, then called the Jubilee Movement, which is based on, I was looking at debt cancellation because I'm very interested in the economic element to what is driving our many catastrophes that people are experiencing right now. And but one of our key strategies was about making connections and mutual aid happening in a huge way, because if you imagine how the economic system works that exploits people, the opposite of that is a system in which everyone is lending inwards to their community, is really working inwardly there, and people are already doing it. During COVID, there were thousands of mutual aid, literally 2,000 mutual aid groups popped up overnight. So we then went out to try and contact all of them. It turns out that very, very few of them were still active. Some still were. And the ones that were active were held together by someone who was a bit of just a superhuman. And just amazing people. And there were amazing people. But the other ones had clearly fallen inactive, because it felt like the need had disappeared. But also, speaking to some of those people, it was also the permission had gone. COVID gave people permission to be nice to each other and to really look out for each other, and also gave people time back that the way in which our lives have been organized takes away. So we spent a lot of time working with those groups, lots of different groups around the country. We focused in on a few neighbourhoods where a lot of our members were sort of near, Sheffield and Islington, as it happened. And we started giving out free meals at the end of every single month. It took an incredible amount of work, I can't describe, just trying to reach out to some of the groups. And again, it's so rewarding. The work is good work, but it's tiring. It was really tiring because I also don't live in Islington, so I was commuting to try and make relationships, which I don't recommend all the time. Doing it locally is really great. But I wanted to introduce this last section, which was just a really quick role play, because it's nice to kind of get us feeling like, how would we do this? How would we go about it? I've also seen a few things in the chat, and just around like what we're doing and why we're doing it, and it being called the big one. The thing that's really exciting about the 100 days, just to sort of steal the mic here for a moment, is that asking 100,000 people to come to Parliament and trying to have that moment where 100,000 people are together means that no one person can do that, no one movement can do that, no one group can bring that many people together. What it means is we've got to sort of get beyond our networks and boundaries and things like that, and we've got to be so much more open than we have been. And it's a hard space, but it's also that same energy of trust and excitement that was what brought so many of us to XR, or what has sustained the movement until now. So to go about working, imagining we're in one of these scenarios. So we're going to go into breakout rooms in a moment, and I'd love for one person, and then they'll swap over, one person to place themselves as someone coming from XR, who, you probably being as yourself, as much as you do right now about the 100 days and what we're going to do on April the 21st in Parliament Square, but also, you know, your community, you know what you can do and how you can work with each other. You feel how you feel. And I'd love for someone else to decide what, and you can decide this together, what local organization they're a part of. Does that organization have a national level to it, or is it just a local group? What are they really focused on? What do they really care about? And what do they think about climate? So you'll have a few moments just to like set that up amongst yourselves. And then I'd really love for you to try and talk it out and see how that goes and see how a relationship can build there. And just as a few nudges, just as I said at the beginning, I mean, the key here as an actor, one of the keys is, you know, when the camera turns on and they say action, you don't suddenly do something different. The scene is in the connection. You didn't make it. It's already there. It's already happening. Action is just something that someone says to the camera. So when you knock on someone's door, it's not action. You've already done that. And then you just say hi, and then it's a bit awkward, but you're responding to the moment. And that I think is a really important thing, is you don't need to do anything special. You don't need to bring anything special. You don't need to know more than you know. It's not about possessing the truth. It's about building something together. So in the role play, I'd love for you to just respond to what they're offering. It's like a great improvisation scene. What are they offering? What does their group need? What makes them tick? What do they care about? And how could you find ways to connect with them in a way that could be mutually beneficial? And it is important to know that when we all get together, we can do something so much bigger than when we're doing things by ourselves. And that's the purpose of 100 days. That's the purpose of trying to get us all together on April the 21st. So yeah, I think we're going to put ourselves into little breakout rooms and play with that. And if you have done that and you feel comfortable with that, change roles. And also, you can also think of putting a curveball in. So if you've heard someone criticize XR, you can put that in and see how you respond to that and play with the scenario. That sound good? No, everyone's afraid. Role play can be really scary. But again, try to not do anything special. You don't need to do anything special, just be you.
Lovely. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Just going to change my view. Just give people 10 more seconds to come in. Okay, I think everyone's back now. Brilliant. Does anybody want to give a little bit of feedback of how that was, or anything that came up? It'd be really nice to hear a little bit of feedback if anyone has any. Simon.
Oh yeah, in our group there were 3 of us, and we ran 2 different scenarios. We did one where we sort of jumped straight in saying that we were Extinction Rebellion and you want to come to a protest down in London, and another where we initiated asking what their local problems were and trying to empathize with them, share with them before moving on to hope of what we could do for the future, and then eventually leading into action. And I think we found that the second approach, where we were empathizing with them and understanding what their local issues were, was a much more acceptable route in than just hitting them straight, join us on the 21st of April.
Oh, fantastic. Did you think there was anything that you could do to support them in their issues?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a fabrication, but yes, I think, but of course, from what we heard earlier, it comes at a cost, because of course we then need to maintain that relationship moving forward. So I think we do need to be careful about how much we spread ourselves, but yes.
Brilliant. Lovely. Thank you, Simon. Stephen.
Hi. Yeah, it was really helpful to have 3 in our group so that one person could be an observer And in our group, you know, Carl did a good job of listening and acknowledging, as an XR person, XR's faults in the past, in thinking maybe they had all the answers, and that was helpful. And then he pointed out that when I was trying to speak to somebody, that I could have done more listening. So that, it was just helpful to work in R3.
Lovely, brilliant. Thank you, Stephen. Tina. You're on mute, Tina.
I'm muted. I wanted to thank Rob for giving us something fun to do. I really enjoyed it. I decided to be a member of the WI, which I've never been a member of the WI, and it was just fun to do, especially because Stephen didn't try and get on my side. He was just trying to persuade me. So I got more and more intense in my defense of jam making.
It sounds like you had great fun. And actually, Stephen, it sounds like, you know, what you're saying about, you know, it being useful is really important. And I wonder whether, you know, maybe in local groups, before you start approaching other local groups, other community groups, that you might want to try and do a little bit of role play first. And that might be quite helpful. Okay, so I'm really sorry, we've overrun by about 16 minutes. Sorry, it was poor planning on our side. I apologize for that. Before we go, I'd just like to open it up to any questions overall. Miranda's had to leave us, so she's not here at the moment, but hopefully Rob's still here. I can't quite see him, but hopefully between us we might be able to answer if anyone has any questions.
Were there any forms that were being filled in?
Sorry, I couldn't see who that was, but there are some forms. There are two forms that we're thinking of filling in. One is for potential community groups, people who you've contacted but haven't said they're coming, and another one is for those who have confirmed. So there's a second form for those people who've said they're coming. The second one is much more important, those people who have confirmed, and we'll be sending out the links to those forms later in a follow-up email tomorrow. People have also suggested it might be a good idea to share spreadsheets of groups who are being contacted in regions, and so that's something that we'll be looking to help support as well. Annika.
I was very interested to hear about what you were saying about connecting with the churches, and I think that's probably my first going to be one of my first angles, I think, alongside, you know, obviously what everyone else thinks in our local group. But I was interested, you held this event and you did a talk. I was interested, what format of talk did you use? Because obviously the Heading for Extinction talk is, you know, it's all true, but also if people haven't really thought about it much before, potentially could make them, you know, just throw their hands up in horror and not want to have anything to do with it. So I don't know what talk you used. So I'd be interested in knowing that.
Yeah, thanks, Annika. Good question. It was modelled on the kind of 3.5 talk. You probably heard about the 3.5 talk, but I updated the talk to kind of make it more relevant to their particular situation, and so that included things on climate justice and things like that, and other things as well. But actually, in the end, even though I'd kind of typed it up, I didn't actually use the script. I ended up kind of just speaking, you know, from what I remembered, because it seemed easier, or more. It seemed to be more suitable in that moment. But also, I did have two other people, and they were contributing as well. So they also said what they felt would be useful to them. So it was a group effort, really. Yeah.
So yeah. just also briefly, did you connect it directly to the Christian message or not? I mean,
So Melanie, who was there from Christian Climate Action, she connected it. Because I didn't feel that from, it didn't feel, to me, it didn't feel important. I mean, I'm not saying it's not important, but for me, but Melanie, who's from Christian Climate Action, did speak to that.
Yeah, okay. And then just the last thing, very quickly, will there be, I was just thinking for initial contacts, it would be useful for there to be some kind of information pack so that people can go away and consider it in their own time without, without feeling stressed because somebody's there with them, trying to persuade them. So you could talk to them and then say, here's an information pack, think about it, and maybe we could meet again once you've had a good look through. So it might answer a lot of their questions. I just wondered if there might be something like that.
I don't think there is anything at the moment, Annika, but I think that's a good point. My personal opinion it would be good as a kind of a secondary document. Personally, I think that the main contact should be about speaking together about what's involved, and then maybe they could have something which they can refer to. That would be my personal opinion.
It's just in terms of if you're asking to speak to their group, like having conversation with the church leader. Yes, I get that, building that relationship. But if you're then wanting to speak to their group, it might be that if they had something to go away and chew over, it might help them on that path, maybe. But I just wondered if there was or there wasn't. So
not at the moment, no. But
okay.
No, that's a good point. Yeah, thank you, Annika. Ruth.
Yes, I'm in Christian Climate Action, and I just wanted to say, if you go to the to what Annika was just saying, if you go to the Christian Climate Action website and click on resources, there's actually a PowerPoint presentation which is specifically targeted at a Christian faith group. Okay. So that's got some quite good stuff, and I've kind of fiddled around with that and put, I really like the climate justice map. Actually, I've included that in my little presentation. I've only done it to a tiny handful of people at my own church, but it was just kind of a way of starting out. But just that resource is there.
Thank you.
Lovely, thanks for that, Ruth. That's really helpful. Is it Jeannie?
Hi, I feel really excited. I do the skills outreach training, and we could easily adapt that format and use it for skills in outreach training. That little role play, the little practice, and that would kind of be and I'd be very, very delighted to do that, and looking for people to join me. And Ned's been doing making all that possible. We've got it on Rebel Toolkit and all that stuff now. But I don't know, did you have some plans, and can I be part of a group that would develop very quickly, because we need to do it quick, and deliver that kind of training?
Yeah, that would be fantastic. Yeah, so we have a small group at the moment for the Alliance Shipbuilding. Yeah, you'd be very welcome to join, Jeannie. And I think actually what we were thinking possibly in the future was setting up kind of regional hubs where people could go to, if people, but it'd be lovely if you could contribute. That sounds really lovely, a lovely thing to do. Thank you. Yeah.
No, it'd be great.
Hopefully I'll get your details from the registration, and I'll send you an invitation.
Okay.
Any other questions? No, lovely. Well, it's been a really delightful session. I'd love to have some time for each of us to go around and do a checkout, but I think there's probably, so maybe if we just all open up our microphones and say one word that comes to mind from this session.
Yay!
Thank you.
Excitement!
Very exciting.
Okay then.
Challenging.
Slightly daunted.
It's all right, you got loads of support.
Fine, it'll be fine.
Thank you. Thank you.
200 days.
Okay, thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely evening, and thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. Bye. Bye.